first talk about what it means to be old school in gaming.
Okay, so this is not going to be a Dimitri lecture, Tom. I need you to be an active participant here, and I'm inviting you to go on this journey with me.
But I need to understand.
All right, so you guys may have heard us use the term old school on the podcast before. So what do we mean about that? So I guess the first distinction I want to make is like sometimes we'll say old school and we are referring to like the dumb games that we grew up on playing as kids, the kind that would be available at Kmart. So this is your Monopoly, your Risk, your Clue. And I was trying to think of Tom, what's the right word for these kind of games? I was using classic games, but I don't want to use a good word like classic to describe these games.
I think that the term for them is mass market games.
Right. Okay.
That's what I would like to use because, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad because two companies, Milton Bradley and Parker Brothers, made the vast majority of these games. But when you look at the games they made, Parker Brothers put out Diplomacy. Let's be clear about that. I
did not know that.
There is an edition or two, and Hasbro has as well, by the way. Put out Diplomacy. Scrabble, I think, is a great game. I think it is a mass market game. There are other really good games that I could put into that.
Yeah, I don't put Scrabble into this category.
Well, Scrabble could go into what we could call classic games, which would be games like Go, chess, bridge, mahjong.
I think that fits better. But you've probably gotten the same question I have. It's kind of like, hey, why don't you guys play those games sometimes?
Which ones?
Monopoly, Stratego, Battleship, Life.
All right, here we go.
Why don't we play those games, Tom?
Here we go. Okay, I believe...
Why don't we play Candyland?
I believe that there was something interesting that happened in the 1990s. I believe that video games had come into existence and people started to realize that, wow, games aren't just for kids anymore because there are all these adults and they're playing these video games, right? They're playing Ultima and they're playing Zelda and they're playing all these games and they're the ones who are buying more games than the kids are. So it sort of changed the perception of game playing as being something that's for kids to something that's for everybody. And once that happened, when we started to look back at board games, we started to realize that these board games are lacking a little something that an adult would need. Some adults, not all, but some adults would need to play these games on a long-term basis. Monopoly, let's just take that for easy punching bag. I don't think Monopoly is a horrible game, but I do think there are certain things like there aren't multiple paths to victory in Monopoly. There's pretty much just one strategy. There's not. I don't
financially ruin everyone else yet.
That's what it is, stuff, right?
Yeah.
Second thing is Monopoly can play for a very long time, and people can be eliminated from the game and have to wait for a very long time for the game to resolve. I think that the end state of Monopoly is a painful one. I don't think it's a pleasant experience for most people.
In that sense, it's definitely old school.
A game in which in the beginning of the game you want to avoid jail at all costs, and at the end of the game you just want to be in jail so you don't have to move. Right. It suggests a problem with the game design itself. Roll and Move itself is a game that is a design that is luck based, right?
Well, you're starting to get to the things like, because I think we're going to get to like mechanics that are kind of that we might define as old school. And like roll and move, roll your dice, move your mice. That is definitely like, okay, let's put that number one on a list of like old mechanics that really don't belong in new games or games that we would want to play now, right?
Yes.
And so, in fact, I think that's almost like such a famous one that we can look at. Like some designers might say, you know what, I bet I can make a roll and move game. It's going to be awesome. And we had an example of that from a year ago.
A game from Queen Games, one of the great all-time publishers. Stefan Feld put out a game.
I'm going to make a roll and move game, called it Merlin. This is going to be a roll and move game for serious Euro players.
And it has about 12 different mechanisms to be able to mitigate the fact that it's
take all the rolling. Trying to make it so the rolling doesn't count that much.
And we all bought it. We all opened it. We all looked at the shiny components and we marveled at it. And we played one game of it, and I can remember we were sitting in the Atlantic Congress Hotel, the hotel that we had that is the hotel that every designer, it was like the who's who of board game designers and the people of the hobby.
Yeah, how did we get in there?
I booked it a year ahead.
That's right. You're the travel expert.
And
your new title for the podcast.
We're just sitting there looking at the game, having finished it, and we're just looking at each other. We're like,
yeah.
huh.
Yeah, huh.
Huh.
That's a little sad, doesn't it?
Like nobody wanted to say it first. We were like, I think you definitely said it first, Trey, because you're the one. Yeah,
I'm the jerk.
But I was looking at Matt like, I don't want to crush you, but I don't think this is a good game.
We were excited to play that game.
We were super excited to play that game. Merlin, like you and that theme.
That was especially painful for me.
That's like your favorite theme in the world.
That's true. I'm such a nerd. All right, so
I read your script.
Oh, let's move it on. That's not nice.
It's perfectly acceptable.
What we are actually talking about a lot of times when we talk about old school on this podcast, though, is I think we're actually being nostalgic to games that defined the early board game hobby industry,
which we can call hobby games. I think that's perfect. If we say mass market games are one type of game and hobby games are another type, that's literally a sales figure distinction to some degree.
Right. And they're also like, you would not have found these games at Kmart or Target.
No.
Now, you had to go to a shop that sold Dungeons and Dragons and board games and miniatures. Like that's what you had to do back in 1978.
And if we were to say when the hobby games became what they are today, when it leaves old school and becomes new school, I think sometime in the early 1990s is about when you do it. You could say 1995 when Catan came out.
It's Catan.
You could say 1993 when Magic the Gathering came out. I think both of those are completely valid. I think those are pretty much the two watersheds that really started to change everything in terms of the design.
Catan is not old school.
Right. I would say that when I look at the games that came out in 93 and 94, I think they were already on the road to becoming the more modern hobby game.
All right, so I'm going to list a bunch of games that I consider old school.
Hit it.
And then you throw in any that you think are worth mentioning.
How about you and I, we go head to head. You say one, I say one.
Okay, Diplomacy.
Sherlock Holmes Consulting Detective.
Civilization.
1830 Railways and Robber Barons.
Dune.
Acquire.
That's on my list. Titan.
Survive, Escape from Atlantis.
Squad Leader or Advanced Squad Leader.
Ooh, I'm going to put that in a different category.
That's a war game?
That's Grognard. That's Grognard, so that's slightly different.
Battletech.
But I'll accept
Battletech.
that. Battletech, totally. Did you say Civ?
I did.
You did say Civ. I'm going to say Republic of Rome.
Yep. Car Wars.
Britannia.
Starfleet Battles.
Ooh, I love that. Cosmic Encounter.
Kremlin.
Oh, Kremlin was the next one I was going to say. Oh, but that means I get to say Sleuth.
Oh, God. You and Sleuth. Rail Baron.
Magic Realm.
Ogre.
Empire Builder.
Illuminati.
Junta.
Did you do Cosmic Encounter already?
I already did.
Merchants of Venus.
Axis and Allies.
Oh, that's a crossover, right?
Listen, that is the mass market game that for its time was the closest to a hobby game.
They were kind of looking at the hobby game and kind of saying, and war games.
And we want to do a little bit of that.
And that is old school because people still play that.
Yeah, it isn't deep, but it is a game that has different strategies. There is not only one way to play or only one way to win, so it's totally valid, I think. Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about
Did you say Wiz War?
No.
Let's say Wiz War just to make sure that to be complete.
Because we love Tom Jolly.
He's so great.
And we would play that. I'd play that.
I won't.
You don't play the new one?
No.
Okay.
But I have the old one.
Yeah, I know. We've done some of our own fan art for that.
Yes, we have.
That game. All right, so let's talk real quick about old school elements or mechanisms that we feel, or just to help identify maybe what these games are, maybe like things that we've left behind, like good mechanisms we've left behind. So we have already said roll to move. I think we've talked about player elimination.
Sure.
Like generally games now don't have player elimination. If they do, they better be short. What's worse than player elimination though is being trapped in a game.
Yes.
Like you would rather sometimes be eliminated than have to sit there with no chance of winning for hours.
The time scale for hobby games in the old school fashion was very, very different than what it is today.
Yep.
Average length of time for games today, probably 2 hours or less. Back then,
Keeps getting shorter too, right?
yeah, it does. Probably
When we talk about a longer game now, we tend to think of it as like old school, right?
yeah.
If you're just like, no, this is a 4 hour, 5 hour game. It's like, ooh, old school.
Yeah, a little bit. But yeah, I think 4 hours is the starting point for a lot of these games. Not all of them, but a lot of them.
Old school games tend to have, or it's more acceptable to have directed aggression.
Yes, very much so. A lot of these games came out of war games, right? War games was the hobby that was robust. There were a lot of war games. There were a lot of war simulations. There are Dungeons and Dragons came out of wargaming. So this was all in existence well before all of that. So men on a map rolling to hit combat one force against another force still felt very natural for the hobby.
Right. I have random/event or conflict resolution. Like, again, this is kind of my thing is randomness, but I think older games were more content with, okay, here's my move. Now let's see what happens. Roll. Check the tables, compare things, who wins.
Yeah, I mean, if you think of Illuminati is a very good example for this era because it was not a men on a map game, but it was definitely a classic old school game. I am trying to take over control of the NRA. I'm going to take over the NRA. I have to. Their control value is blank. My power is blank. I have a base roll of this, but look, in my power structure, one away, I have these guys, and these guys say I have a +3 if I'm attempting to take over that. I have the John Birch Society.
But still, you're going to succeed or fail based upon your die roll.
Right, but so it is random. It is output randomness. But it is also a thing that good play will add a strategy element to that because what you're doing is you're hunting for the optimal situation.
And I would just say that I think that modern gamers have less patience for that.
Yeah,
I certainly do, and it's like when we talk about Twilight Struggle, for example, it's those elements that bother me about that game, and like the takeover roles kind of fall into that category. That's an old school element of Twilight Struggle that I object to.
I guess what I'm pointing out to is that there's a progression, right? Monopoly, there's a role, and whatever the role is, you get what you get, and there's nothing you can do to make it more likely that you are going to land on this space or on this space. There's nothing in the world that affects that. In Sorry and Candyland, there's next to nothing that affects your game the entire game. The way the cards are shuffled, that's who's going to win. So even though there is a lot of luck in terms of there's a lot of randomness in a game like Illuminati, it still is much more of a strategy game than any of its predecessors in the mass market side.
Yeah, this is a period of transition, and it feels more defined now, like what's been left behind.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I have a couple of little quirky ones here, which and then if you've got any that you want to throw in, one that occurred to me is that we don't see anymore or shouldn't. Paper money. Paper money used to be like almost one of the defining things of like how many board games did we have paper money from that I used to have on my shelves, and they get mixed in with other things, and you could almost tell what game it was by like the way the currency looked. Whereas like nothing's got paper money now.
I still love looking at a tray of Monopoly money. The different colors. I love it. I look at them like, oh my god, that's so great.
It's a Pavlovian. Ooh, play a game.
If it wasn't a pain in the butt, I would play with paper money today.
Well, but there's good reasons not to, though, right? There's a reason why we want to play with chips.
Yes.
And that is you, though, because you like hiding. You like hiding your money. You do. Like, this happens in your game all the time. It's like we have arguments about whether stuff is public information or not. And like with paper money, you can have your stack, and like I can't tell what you have there.
And I say everything is public money if you just remember what everybody has and you just keep track of it in your mind.
This is what I have to deal with, people. All right, the final little quirky one I had was actually talking about maps. Like I think a lot of these games were actually kind of like defined by maps, and I think that modern games have a lot less maps, and when they do, they tend to be drawn differently now. So if you think about like the map behind Risk, you know, like there's a lot of games like that from this kind of period.
Oh yeah, Supremacy and the like Axis and Allies too. I mean, so many of those games have had a very similar take on this is how we do it.
Yeah, and I think it's actually hard to find a lot of examples of modern games that do that. I think they tend to do more point-to-point stuff now. So that if you think about like the map of Marco Polo is not these regions that touch and border and that we're putting units inside of. It tends to be more like you're moving and I have these two choices of which way I'm going to go. I'm not sure that there's actually something substantive here. It's just like, but that was more the mindset of games, of these older games, was like, we're going to put armies in spaces.
Yep.
We're going to fight.
Yes.
Like I'm going to move my armies. And so maybe something like Civilization has some of that. Dune has some of that. Like we're still talking about these different spaces that we can move stuff around, then we're going to fight and you're going to control stuff. So this is more of like just an aesthetic thing. Like we don't tend to have these like big map battle games.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Anymore.
I will say that the thin paper square chits, this is an era where we can cut things in squares very, very easily and very, very well. And any other shape, you are basically out of luck. So there are so many games from Dune on up to anything where your armies are these incredibly thin little cardboard chits that you have a stack of on the map and you're moving. I'll also say that a lot of these games, there was a freedom in these games that we don't have anymore.
Freedom to attack others?
I will name a couple games. I will say that I don't think anybody makes Kremlin today. I don't think anybody makes Junta today.
Okay.
Junta, when you get right down to it, is a war game that was actually a party game as well. And the idea to mix a war game and a party game, because it's all, okay, El Presidente, and El Presidente gets the money. He's the only one who knows how much money he got this turn and says, the gringos have been very stingy today, my friends. It's very, very sad. I am sorry to say that, General Number One, I only have $1 banana dollar for you.
It's horrible.
It's so good. It's so good. Because then eventually,
I want to play that game.
He's not able to keep everybody happy. And eventually people have to overthrow him. And then the moment you overthrow him, you enter this small war game that takes too long, unfortunately, but is interesting in and of itself. And they were mimicking and making fun of, they were mocking the banana republics and those petty dictators of that era.
And why do you think this can't be made now?
I don't see games.
Is it a PC thing, or you're just saying like, no, it just takes too long?
No, I think that nobody would think to try and mix a war game and a party game, and I also don't think that people are playing with satire. I think games at this time were very satirical and were sort of, there was a counterculture aspect to the games that doesn't really exist today. I think that our games these days come from I think Germany had a lot to do with the way games became, and they didn't. And satire was not part of it, right? It was all very
for a good reason,
very buttoned down and straight. Look, there. Wir sind das Volk is a very interesting game that feels a lot like some of these games that I'm talking about, but that's the exception rather than the rule. I'd say Kremlin is an amazing, hilarious parody of the Soviet era after the death of Stalin. That is hilarious. I love playing it. I find it to be a very interesting game.
Yeah, I think both of those games actually hold up really well, and I think they're tremendously sophisticated. Like they're falling into the category of like old school that I might still want to play. You just might look at some of the elements and say, oh, there's some elements here that still feel old. We're rolling dice to see if people die in Kremlin. But yeah, those are There's certainly thought-provoking games, and I don't think there's anything about modern games that's anti-thought-provoking or anti, playing a character.
Maybe not. I think that in making what we have made these days, which are better games,
or is it that another part of the hobby has kind of taken that over? Are you going to get that kind of Junta or Kremlin thing out of RPGs or stuff that Jason Morningstar does?
Well, I think you're probably getting more of that experience in things like Blood on the Clock Tower. That's I think where that kind of feeling went. Right. But I also don't think, Secret Hitler, I guess, is probably the closest thing to that. But there's not really any satire going on there.
I'm more interested in playing those games than Secret Hitler. But
yeah, I kind of agree with you.
So maybe finishing up on the map thing, I just look at something like Through the Ages. It's a Civ game.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
The one more thing that I wanted to say is that games of this era sometimes were not games, but game systems.
They care about simulation.
Yes. I'm going to talk about two things in particular. ASL, Advanced Squad Leader, and Starfleet Battles.
Yeah.
They're amazing. And the people who play them make you never want to play these amazing games because they are
they're systems, though.
They are what you do is you have a binder. It is a 3-ring binder, and when you first get the game, you have 30 pages in that binder, but then you get this supplement and this expansion, and
it's
you
even
get
more
this
than
thing,
that. Yeah,
and then you get you start filling that binder.
But that was
in.
the economic model too. Is like you'd create more content.
Yeah, Starfleet Battle is a war game for tax lawyers. That is what it is. It is people that are filling in their sheet and marking off their boxes.
But you got to design your own ships. Like that was all the fun of BattleTech.
Amazing.
You designed your own mechs. You'd say, "Let's fight. We each have 200 tons. Go."
I think base Starfleet Battles is an incredible game, and I would play that. I would play that any day.
And you object to the bloat.
I do object to the bloat, and I think ASL is an amazing game. And the sad thing about it is that the modules that come after that are also amazing, but it ends up creating something that it values memorization of details to too high a degree for it to be pleasurable to any kind of audience.
I don't want to play that.
Yeah.
So just finishing up on this then, to me, thinking about something like Through the Ages is a great example of like why we're in a new era, because it's a Civ game. And like in the 70s and 80s, if you were going to play a Civ game, there would have been a map.
Has to be a map.
And you're moving armies and you're attacking other people. And like something like Through the Ages and now Nations and a number of games, there's Civ games, they just got rid of the map. That's not the game they want to play. They also like
which I miss though. I mean, listen, I like Through the Ages much better, and it's something I can play a lot more often. But there's something amazing about a map. There really still is.
But that's kind of embracing the old school when you want to play that game.
Yeah. Listen, I wish you could have your cake and eat it too, but you kind of can't.
But can we with Dune?
Oh,
because there's a map.
Yeah, there is.
And we put our units on the map.
Yes, we do.
We fight.
Yes, we do.
Okay, so